and how we
Hmm.
design modular-based products today to actually how do we design modular-based organizations. And it's kind of a reemergence of Conway's law, where actually Conway's law was designed in the 70s, which came to the conclusion that actually most organizations' product designs are heavily influenced by their organizational design. How do we flip that around and actually now have an organizational design optimized to deliver the product that I'm looking to put out at the end?
For whatever reason, they just install the Scrum team or they have somebody that's doing Scrum and nothing dramatically changed. And then that can sour them on this. Now they know it doesn't work, right? How do you get around that? Because I imagine your group must face that more than somebody selling something more like sexy and new.
What's one thing based on kind of all these interviews that you see kind of coalescing and coming across as kind of a meta theme that we all could learn from?
Matthew, welcome to the Growth Stories podcast. So happy to have you on the show. So you're the Chief Product Officer for Scrum Inc. And what does it mean? Because I think most everyone will know what Scrum is that watches this. And I'm curious, what does it mean to look at Scrum as a product for Scrum Inc.?
Yeah, so the way we look at Scrum is, I think, a little bit unique and different. A lot of the industry looks at Scrum as a set of practices. When our founder, Dr. Jeff Sutherland, co-created Scrum, to him, Scrum was a tool. It was a method used to be able to create results in organizations that he was working at. So at Scrumming, we really step away of like Scrum ever being the point and really focus it back to what its original intent was, is how do we deliver results in a complex world? And specifically at Scrum Inc., we've come to realize also that Scrum teams alone aren't enough. If I work in an environment that doesn't support Scrum teams, it doesn't really matter. I need actually an agile environment and an agile organization for a Scrum team to thrive. So in a lot of our work right now is much less focused on team level Scrum, but how do we create an environment where Scrum teams can thrive? How do we make an organization that is more adaptive to the current pace of change in today's work environment? How do we create the world's best delivery engine for your organizational strategy?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, it's like you can't deprive the teams of oxygen. It doesn't, yeah, they have to have the basic resources to be able to accomplish, what they're setting out to do. And how, like, is there a way in which you look at it as a product as opposed to like a set, instead of a lot of people in this space look at this as kind of like a consulting engagement for companies to, help them improve, or certain specific individuals are interested in making something more, making a team or a BU more agile. And I'm curious if you do have a different lens on it.
Well, I think there's like two questions in there. Like, how do we view our consulting services as a product? But there's
Hmm.
also this really emerging lens of how do I view my organization as a product? So most organizations we talk to are also simultaneously going through that mindset shift of working on a series of projects to actually, I have a series of products and services my organization delivers, which have initiatives in those that have no endpoint. How do I continuously make it better? If I look at my organization itself as a product, like something that delivers directly to the market, what are things that are the users don't like? Those are the people within the system. What is it the customers don't like? How do I actually continuously optimize the product that is my organization to be better? I think the best example of this, we were working with a robotics company. The
Hmm.
two co-founders were professors who had really been running an R&D organization for a long period of time. And the organization now had a go-to-market, it had industry, it had P&L. There was much more they needed to worry about. And taking that academic approach to this now product-based company, there was a lot of difficulty and friction kind of inside the organization. And I looked at them, these people are system engineers by very nature. I was like, how much time do you think about looking at the system that delivers the systems of robots that you're developing? And the co-CEOs looked at each other and said, no time.
Zero.
It was like, how do we take,
Yeah.
yeah, how do we take that systems thinking and apply it to our organization itself? And what you're seeing is this really interesting confluence between product design and organizational design being very similar. How do I move much more of the compute to the edge? How do I have a more of a cellular based design that can adapt and reintegrate and evolve, where the center is just kind of responsible for alignment and coordination? So you're actually seeing this product type thinking and how we
Hmm.
design modular-based products today to actually how do we design modular-based organizations. And it's kind of a reemergence of Conway's law, where actually Conway's law was designed in the 70s, which came to the conclusion that actually most organizations' product designs are heavily influenced by their organizational design. How do we flip that around and actually now have an organizational design optimized to deliver the product that I'm looking to put out at the end?
I love the connection to Conway's lie. Yeah, that's a great point. It sounds like you're just taking what worked in one area and trying to generalize it across, larger and larger kind of logical chunks of the business until you get to the entire organization design.
Yeah, and that's then evolved our product and how we approach. Like one of the things kind of in this space that I don't think was entirely helpful, but like this pushback against consulting. No, we need to be coaches and advisors. We can't own your organization. And this created this like what I thought was actually a not healthy, totally helpful debate. What we've really discovered is what you actually, most organizations are looking for is a guide. Just if you were climbing a mountain, that guide's on the mountain with you. And sometimes they're leading from the front because they know the terrain, they've been through that terrain
Hmm.
more, and they're there to help you accelerate your process. But at the end of the day, you still need to walk forward. At times, maybe that person's looking for more advanced skill sets. That guide's now leading from behind and ensuring that you don't make a drastic mistake. So, as a guide working with that organization, how do we help them navigate to their objective in the way that makes sense for whatever their ending objective actually is at the end of the day?
Yeah, and some of these terms they make these small like frame shifts. If you are a consultant or a coach, or and then they have very specific kind of meanings in different organizations, like what they would, some, for example, I know some companies have policies against coaches, for example, or against outside consultants. And then you have to find a way to, if you're trying to help an organization that can't hire consultants, you have to find a way to turn it into a tangible deliverable. Yeah.
The question was good. Yeah, I think these are actually all different tools, just like Scrum itself. If a plumber came to your house and started taking out the world's best wrench and started talking to you about the wrench incessantly, you would throw them out of your house because you're like, I have a leaking pipe that's flooding my basement. Go fix the pipe. I
Yeah.
think as any people who push frameworks, if that's consulting or coaching, Scrum, Safe, Kanban, it doesn't really matter. These are all the tools. The second we're talking about the tool and technique I'm using, we've lost the plot already. We need to focus on the end outcome and that objective that organization's trying to get to, and then use the right tools to be able to get them there. So let's stop
Yeah.
focusing on our toolbox and focus on what the customer is actually looking for.
This is a like human behavior problem that a lot of times people are kind of secretly hoping for a new tactic. This year is going to be different, and there's going to be a new tactic or technique that's going to work. And it's very attractive for a lot of companies, for just regular people, because they have no experience with it failing. And then I think about something like Scrum that has a lot of adoption. And I think there's a lot of people who have, for whatever reason, they just install the Scrum team, or they have somebody that's doing Scrum, and nothing changed, nothing dramatically changed. And then that can sour them on this. Now they know it doesn't work, right? How do you get around that? Because I imagine your group must face that more than somebody selling something more like sexy and new. Yeah.
So I would say every framework follows like a pattern of it working and the early people really getting it. And then you have these tail-ons who are really focused on the process and doing it. And then stops working for them. And then over a period of time, people get back and are like, wait, no, this really works, and approach it very differently. You've seen the same thing with lean. Like everybody had their corporate lean programs based on what Toyota and some others were doing, which were extremely successful. They all failed. Significant investment that got them nowhere because what they were really focused on was the practice.
It's
They
like
were,
mimicking, copying someone else's tool is the wrong, is like getting what worked in their organization might not work within yours.
and also like if you take OKRs, another one that's going through this, like
Yes.
Google and Intuit in the beginning, when they did OKRs, it was to drive empowerment and strategic alignment. If you just do OKRs, but it isn't for the mindset of we don't actually know the answer, we need to empower edge teams to be able to get there, but we want to provide a framework of how we know it, we're actually moving in the right direction to adapt and adjust, then it doesn't matter. OKRs are an absolutely useless tool because it's a different thinking about how I solve the problem. So like you're not going to use Uber to replace your car. It's actually a different thinking about transportation and locomotion. So let's go back to Scrum. If I launch a Scrum team that has 30 people on it, doesn't own a product or service end to end, has no actual empowerment, I can do Scrum and do my planning, my retros review. I may get a little bit of improvement, but I miss the underlying conditions, which is more of a mindset that then Scrum enables. And you see this also right now, I think, with organizations who are going through like massive empowerment cultural transformations. If I don't believe empowerment, by just delegating more things on a piece of paper, but then
Yeah.
behavior
Yeah.
wise, not following through on any of that stuff, it's not going to work. So it's really coming back at the core. What am I trying to accomplish? What are those underlying principles? And then the practices should just be supporting those things. But we need to go back to like, what are we actually trying to achieve? What are the principles to achieve that? Then what are my supporting practices? If I jump right to the practices, I can do all the practices and get nowhere.
Yeah, I love that. And when you're as you're describing this, I'm just thinking that, at the end of the day, behind every process, there's a person. We're talking about changing people's behaviors. How do you push leaders or help leaders figure out what is the right way to use these tools and really see what that underlying like strategic goal needs to be? Because I know a lot of people get excited about like very simple things. We get excited like, "Oh man, if I could have my team be twice as efficient, that would be great." Or if we could accelerate our delivery or improve our DORA metrics or what have you, good. I think that it connects to revenue and let's do it. But it's very simple thinking. How do you connect it to a larger vision that's appropriate for that group?
Yeah. So it's kind of stepping back. If a company calls us and goes, "Oh, I'd love to do Scrum," my answer is like, why? What are we trying to achieve? What are we getting back in the way? And I think that's a good job of like a guide and or a consultant to make sure we truly understand the why. And if the customer can't interact, can't articulate it, help them get there. We actually have done some training with mountain guides in our organization on this. And like when a customer comes to them and goes, "I want to climb that mountain," their first question, a good guide doesn't go, "Great, let's put on our stop and go." It goes, "Why do you want to climb the mountain?" "Well, I want to learn because I'm actually doing this better trip that's self-supported." Okay, maybe that's not the right objective. We should be doing something a little bit different for your skill set to be able to get there. So it's making sure we're getting there. If it's actually, I'm flying out from New York and I just want to go on an adventure and want to stay and climb on that mountain. Okay, let's check your overall fitness level. And do you know what? I'm going to pull you a lot more and lead much more of this because you're not actually really for the skills development. You just want to get to that end point. So we've
Mhm.
really got to step back. And that's actually the first job. It has nothing to do with Scrum or Agile, is really helping the client articulate a vision of where they want it to be. And the more we can extrapolate back to that, and it leads to good Agile, like with a user story of like, as a customer, I want what, so that if the customer can't answer that, it doesn't really matter. And then if you think about it in terms of this Scrum per se, where you actually give a very clear outcome and you let the team figure out the what, then I never even need to talk about Scrum or user-centered design because those are the tools I brought to place because we are dead aligned to what or why we're trying to get somewhere. And then what are those principles that are going to unlock it? And you're leaving me the freedom to figure out how to help you get there.
Love it. So, with one question I have for you, especially now, because we're recording this in January 2026, what are you the most excited about for the future of Scrum and Scrum Inc?
What I'm the most excited about, this convergence of a bunch of different things happening at once. The pace of change in the world is continuing to increase. AI, digital transformation, the modern workplace or workplace 3.0 or the service-based revolution, whatever you want to call it. All these are convergent and they're not different. They're kind of additive. And I think more and more organizations are starting to ask the right questions. Is like, I need to be utterly clear on what my organizational strategy is. Then I need an organizational design that supports that organizational strategy. Then I need policies and procedures that supports that organizational design. Then I need ways of working that support those policies and procedures. And then I need a culture and tooling to support that entire stack. So what I call is like a full stack transformation. If I have an
Mhm.
issues with ways of working, I need to look up a level. Is it I have a design issue or do I have a policy and procedure issue? If I have a culture issue, do I have a ways of working issue that's driving that culture? But looking at as a vertical stack. And actually, if I want to move forward and be more agile, but be more digital and be faster, it's actually a very similar set of tooling and a very similar answer that starts to all come together and be reinforcing, and actually allows you to get to a much bigger question than, do I want to be a more agile organization? Actually, do I want to be the most effective organization to unleash the capital and the potential of the human beings in my organization?
I love that. Thank you so much, Matthew.
No problem. Can I ask you one question at the end here?
Yes, do it. Sure.
What's one thing based on kind of all these interviews that you see kind of coalescing and coming across as kind of a meta theme that we all could learn from?
Oh, yes. Well, that's a great question. I'm trying to think about it right now. Some themes, one, you know what, because I speak to kind of a few different groups of people. One is a lot in the SaaS world, and the other is a lot in the consulting world. And one of the things that I've noticed is a lot of really successful consultants or who have large firms that have done amazing things. It's almost like reading different philosophy where you're like, well, a lot of these people are saying very similar stuff. There's like some core truths that people have figured out maybe through different ways, and they have called it something, and they've made it palatable for different groups. But there's a lot of like really like the fundamentals of like yeah, management and being a good human kind of are super important. And it seems like people discover them in different, throughout their lives in different ways through all the painful lessons we all learn. But that's one of the things that I've noticed is even people who have what sounds to be radically different approaches with different marketing, a lot of it is around, communicating, dealing with change, getting people on the same page, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I don't find it threatening when I like read something from a different framework or a different kind of leadership philosophy coming out that's saying something very similar. I actually find it self-reinforcing that different journeys are coming to the same conclusions. And I was reading, you had mentioned your kids in the beginning of this podcast. Actually, if you look at a lot of the modern parenting advice, it comes to
Yeah.
a very
Yes.
similar conclusions to what they're saying about
Yes.
modern leadership. There's this
Yeah.
something inherently human that we're getting closer to, like, not ignore all the practices, but like the core principles tend to be the same because they're actually just how our brains are wired. And we're just getting a better understanding of them.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. Well, thanks for the question, Matthew. And yeah, it was a pleasure chatting with you.
Perfect. No, I really appreciate the time and look forward to the opportunity to talk again at some point.
Excellent. Okay.